Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the summer holiday edition of the Governance Committee held tonight. We'll kick off straight away with agenda item number 1, which is apologies.
Thank you, Chair. We have no apologies. However, Councillor Mannion is running late.
Okay, that means item number 2 is moot, so we'll move on to number 3. Do we have any declarations of interest? I'll take your silence as a no. Okay, that's fine. The abbreviation game before we start. There were 3 that I noticed that we might not know. One was something we have touched on before, which is PWLB, Public Works Loan Board, MMF, Money Market Fund, and MRP, Minimum Revenue Provision. Yeah, I'm looking at you for that. Okay, so before we start, I just kind of want to acknowledge that Martin Bates is no longer a councillor with us. And obviously he contributed really heavily to this committee, and he was never afraid to ask a really detailed, long question. And quite frankly, I'm going to miss that, and he's going to leave a massive gap, which I'm going to expect you all to fill. Councillor Beer?
I'd like to second your regret that Martin Bates is no longer in this committee or in this council, because he was a valuable member, and I'm sure we'll miss him.
Councillor Loughman?
I'm thirding that. I think his assiduous attention to detail is something that's going to be particularly missed in relation to some of the reports we happily enjoy in future editions of this committee.
The same.
Yeah, it's very kind of you all to be so supportive of Martin. I was very lucky to work with him, and the fact that I learned so much from him just sitting next to him, and I'm sure we all enjoyed the questions that he put forward. But he did teach me a lot, and I'm very grateful for that. So I will definitely miss him. Thank you.
So I'm expecting you to fill Martin's gap tonight with a million questions of the same calibre. And obviously, it's probably more important than ever to note that this committee isn't here to second guess the decisions that were made within the budget. We are just here to be looking at the controls and to give assurance for what we see. So in that, we'll move on to item number 4. Which is the annual write-off report, parking services, which will be discussed by Andrew. No? Yes?
Thanks.
Yes.
So the purpose of the report is to advise members of the value of the write-offs of parking services for the financial year 25-26. The debt written off during this period was a total of £48,423, of a circa £740,670 raised in the year, which is a 7.2% write-off level. The write-offs in relation to the penalty charge notices, which is PCNs, and they are not always completed in the same year, which gives us some challenge in the reporting to sort of reflect the true pictures. If you look in the report at section 3.3, you can see that there are less penalty charge notices issued in 25-26. This is largely as we were operating around a 50% civil enforcement officer resource level. We have now recruited, and the expectation is we will return to a more normal level in 26-27 for PCNs. In 24-25, there were no write-off figures received from enforcement agents, and that means that the PCN's percentage is lower for that period. It also has the knock-on effect that inflates 25-26. So when we look at the percentages as a comparison, that's quite a key fact that will impact those differences. The other thing to flag around the foreign vehicles is that they are civil debts, not criminal penalties, and we don't always have reciprocal agreements. So it means we are unable to get details to chase, and therefore the write-off is inevitable rather than a decision that we're making. And the other key changes. The unable to pursue has improved, and that is in relation to historic issues back in 24-25, where we were with team resilience struggling to actually get the processes put through, which meant that was higher in that particular period. Open up for any questions.
Letter of questions. Like to see that. We're going to go Councillor Knight, Councillor Beer, Councillor Loftman and Councillor Williams, all in that order.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew, thanks for that. You probably touched on what I was going to ask, but over the agenda item 4, item 31, the DBL keeper has moved in your second bullet point here. There's a couple of questions. So, do we not follow up on any new addresses? And enforcement, what is the time allowed before we give up on chasing? Item 3.2, even though the number of PCNs that were raised dropped by 23%, the proportion written off increased by 26%. So I'd be interested to know what the reason is behind that. And finally, on agenda for 3.4, and you did touch on this, your notes, in your notes, you mentioned the returns from enforcement agents were 0 in 24-25, with the 669 in 25-26, making the figure 37,000 over the 2 years. It would be good to understand what was due in 24-25 and 25-26, and to understand if this is a growing problem, a static problem, or a reducing problem. Thank you.
Okay, so in order, 3.1, the second bullet point around the DVLA keeper has moved from the registered address. Our main source is DVLA. So if DVLA hasn't been kept up to speed, then we are relying on them to have the information. If we don't have them, then that is where the time frame will actually extend, and potentially will go for debt enforcement. They have other routes and other ways of trying to find information other than DVLA. So that's the sort of reason really that we'll chase them as best we can with the information that's available, and then we'll start to look at debt enforcement as an option there for those. The second question, I believe, was around the figures and the percentages. The two key factors is we had less of a team to issue PCNs, so that's why there's a reduction there. And during that period, the write-off figures for the enforcement agents was carried across. So we've moved the whole of that period. They counted in 25-26. Nothing was counted in 24-25. So it is disproportionately pushing those percentages up. So actually it would have probably been an improvement if we'd been able to have them put in the right years for when they were actually written off from the debt enforcement side of things. I don't have the detail available for the sort of final part of that question in terms of what it would look like if we were able to break that down to hand, but I can certainly look at that for you.
Councillor Beer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we see a very checkered picture here of the parking services success or lack of it. So I'd like us to look forward and ask what steps have been taken to make sure we have a reliable service in 26-27 and 27-28.
Yeah, I think we're doing a lot of training. We're supporting the guys out on the streets a lot more with getting them good kit to try and keep them in role. Obviously, it is a difficult job, and we have to accept that they are being challenged on a daily basis in ways that we wouldn't do in many other professions. So we're doing all we can to support them with technology, directly with support as an enforcement team. The administration side of things, we've been doing skills analysis, we've recruited new staff, and we've actually been looking at cross-skilling, so we don't have such a resilience on one or two individuals. And that's something we're going to need to keep working on. There's a long way to go on that, but we've made some good inroads already in terms of training and cross-skilling the team. So those are the sorts of things that we're looking at to try and get that resilience into it, to avoid some of the issues there where we're missing opportunities. I think in terms of the general behaviours, we do push as far as we can. We're very passionate about making sure that if the money's there to be recovered, we'll do everything we possibly can. And generally, the vast majority of the write-offs come back once we've tried debt enforcement and we've not been able to get the detail, and therefore we've got nowhere to go with it. There's very few that will write off for any other sort of main reason, other than not being able to get hold of the details, similar with the foreign vehicles.
Councillor Loughman.
Thank you. Several of my points have already been raised, so I'm down to just the one, Andrew, you'll be pleased to know. Contrary to the usual Bates precedent, so forgive me, Chair. The unable to pursue, what a significant improvement that's been. But I'm just wondering, is this the kind of figure we might consider is likely to occur in the future, or will there be another historic issue that might impose itself on that statistic?
Yeah, indeed. It was actually a quite serious medical condition for the individual that was off work, so it was hopefully not a repeat or a regular thing that we would hope not to see for the individuals more than anything else. So whilst I would like to think that with the resilience we're building in the team, we will avoid those types of situations.
Thank you, Andrew. Given your previous answer to Councillor Beer, it seems to be key then that staffing levels are vital to maintain the best standard that we can. So are we fully staffed at the moment?
So this is specifically around the administration side of things that we had this challenge. This is where the upskilling and the cross-skilling is coming to its fruition. We are a very small team. We keep ourselves small to be as efficient as we possibly can. It's something we'll always keep reviewing, and if we are more successful, as we're hopefully going to be in terms of targeting those individuals where they're parking antisocially, and we get more income from PCNs, we'll have more administration. We'll potentially need more staff going forward. At the moment, I believe we've got the right levels.
Councillor Williams.
Can I pick up on what you talked about with the foreign vehicle recovery, lack of reciprocal arrangements? How could this be improved? I mean, should we be writing letters to the Ministry of Transport or what? Any suggestions?
Yes, it's one of the biggest bugbears, to be honest, because we're really frustrated we can't deal with some of these situations. They have quite a large impact when you have especially HGVs parked in places they shouldn't be. It is a central government challenge. It's not something we can solve locally. From my point of view, from my view, it would be great to be able to stop them at the border and either not let them in the country or not let them out of the country until they've paid the PCN. We wouldn't need their details then. Clamping is one format, but again, that's quite expensive, and we don't have the regulations or the laws that enable us to do that as a district council within relation to parking. There are other organisations, and we've seen that in the past work quite well, where they have the power to clamp, and then we've worked together to get the PCN paid at the same time.
If you have any ideas of how we could possibly help, I don't know, writing to our local MP or anything like that, outlining the problem, I'd be happy to get that from you. Thank you.
I'll send you an email. Thank you.
Councillor Loughman, are you looking pensive like you have another question? Or
It's not so much a question as being thankful for the report and proposing that we note that.
Well, you jumped the gun. I was about to say that. Okay, so the next thing is we're going to vote to note this. So could I get a show of hands? Yeah, horns today. Right, thank you very much. That has been noted. Okay, so we're going to be moving on to agenda item number 5, which is the annual debt collection report. Welcome for joining us, Councillor Mannion. Okay, so this is agenda items pages 8 to 23, and this is going to be Sharon.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sharon Harvey. I am the Revenues and Benefits Operational Manager for Partnership 1. The report before you today is to advise you of the value of income collected and the write-offs in respect of council tax, business rates and corporate income, all of which are managed by Partnership 1. The report provides you the overall debt position, the collection rates and the overall level of write-offs proposed, and the totals for each of the service can be found in 1.4 of the summary page. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go Councillor Knight and Councillor Loughman. Then Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Straight in on page 12, really. I just made some notes here because there's some disturbing things that I'm looking at. What, for example, in the first box on the top of page 12, just like to ask why an individual was allowed to run a debt between 2014 and 23. That's 9 years. And then directly below in the next box, there's another individual there that's been allowed to run a debt between 2011 and 2013 for 15 years. And this trend seems to be repeated throughout this report. In fact, there's 11 instances of individuals with no trace, debts between 10,000 and 77,000. That's quite worrying. I'm sure there's good reasons for it, but surely this many people can't just disappear. Jokingly, I was thinking that maybe we should report it to the police because we may have a serial killer on the loose here. But generally, I would like to understand why we allow these debts to go so long. Thank you.
Yeah, I do take your point. However, I can assure you that we've done everything that we can in order to collect it. With your point to the first individual council taxpayer, that customer was actually in contact with us throughout the periods of those arrears. And we had 15 arrangements set up with them as they tried desperately to make payment of their council tax. It's not always a simple process, and it takes quite a number of hours and time to try and get somebody to adhere to the payment arrangements that we're agreeing. This particular customer, unfortunately, the council tax debts is the tip of the iceberg, and they did have considerable other arrears. They entered into the breathing space scheme, which is a scheme set up so the customer can go to debt advice providers in order to get advice on how to deal with their council tax debts, as well as the other debts that inevitably they will have. And that resulted in a debt relief order. And unfortunately, at the point that the debt relief order comes into force, we're bound by those terms. So we have to put those arrears for write-off. It isn't, so in the case of the council tax example there, it isn't always the case that the customer hasn't tried to make the payment, and we will work with them to try and help them to pay. But ultimately, it's not always a happy ending. We don't always manage to get them onto a clear debt cycle to enable that as we go forward.
Yeah, just to follow on, I kind of understand all of that. But if you take that first case, then it finishes in 23. What's happened for the last 3 years? And has that person been removed, or is that debt still building? Are we going to add another couple of years to this debt?
The customer is no longer residing in our district, so we potentially may see dividends from that debt relief order, but in all honesty, it's unlikely. But where we do receive dividends, the write-off is then reversed to reflect, so then therefore reduced over a long period.
So would that be fair to say that all those other items that we've listed, no trace, etc., are a similar type of situation, or are there some?
No, not all of them. And for business rates, individual payers, it is often different, but those payers have absconded. We do have rigorous trace proceedings, and we do send our arrears to enforcement agents for tracing if we can't find the debtor. But on this occasion, on all of those cases, the enforcement agents were unsuccessful, and we've been unable to trace them.
Councillor Loughman.
Thank you, Chair. Several points, and without wishing to go an inch away from the important questioning that Councillor Knight's just done, I note that in 4.8 and 5.2, we've achieved a substantial assurance rating in this regard, And in 5.2, there's been a significant impact on collections. And I think the team should be congratulated on those two particular aspects. And whatever I say now is in that context. Okay. In 2.4, there's been a decrease of 0.87% collection of council tax. And looking at Appendix 2, 25-26, we've got a 95.97 collection as opposed to what's in previous years in 98%, and I'm wondering why. In Appendix 2 also, there's a matter of 957 IVAs at £93,000. And I'm just wondering whether you can make some explanation for that. I'm sure you can. So I'm giving you the prompt.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the recognition. With regards to the council tax collection, nationally there are significant issues with payments and deprivation that we've seen across the districts in total for all of Kent. So Dover isn't an outlier in that respect. People have less income. And also we've seen some significant difficult circumstances where people are made redundant and also have some really difficult life choices and ill health. And all of that builds into that overall picture. So it is a difficult position. And for some people, the non-payment isn't always a case that they willfully won't pay their council tax. It's just that they're hugely struggling to pay it. We are very lenient in our arrangements for customers with difficult circumstances, and we do have a special provision for those that are really struggling with their council tax and suffering with some really difficult circumstances in their life. But unfortunately, all of those processes, when you look at it holistically, has a significant impact on collection. With reference to your point to IVAs, we have seen a significant increase in IVAs. And I think that mainly that's probably as a result of the debt advice agencies and the money advice trusts who are out there and get greater funding to help customers. It's not always as harsh as a bankruptcy, and the period and term of repayment can go from 12 months to 6 years. So what it does do is it looks at the customer's overall debt and then it tries to get them on an even keel as we go forward so they can afford to pay what's there now, and then makes their overall debt previously much more manageable for them. So we have seen an increase in that. And the IVAs, we do tend to get some dividend payments. Some of them are as small as £3 because we're not quite as high as the creditors list, but others can be quite significant. As you can see, people are trying to get back and get their life back in order.
I take your points, and I'm glad we have that special provision by way of support, because when you look at Appendix 3 in companies gone without trace, the liquidation and insolvency that is absolutely listed reflects an economic situation which we would all prefer not to have, and which has a significant impact on our council funds and our council operations. So I do appreciate what you're saying, and we hope for growth and better times with our new Prime Minister.
Councillor Williams, then Councillor Knight.
Okay, thank you. I've got several bits and pieces of questions. First of all, I've got top of the list. I noticed that you're substantial assurance, so that is good, really good. Can you tell me who you use for enforcement agents? Are they private company or are they part of Partnership One?
We use two enforcement agents. Excuse me. The first one is Dukes, and they're a private company, and the second one is the Marstons Group, and they're also a private company, both of which have employed enforcement agents and not self-employed enforcement agents. And they are two of the biggest and most reputable enforcement agents that are within the business.
5.2, can you tell me what on arrangement means? And 7.8, is that a software issue? 7.8 is, sorry, let me just get there. 7.8, you mentioned no transactional action can be taken to finalise the cases, and you're continuing to work with the IT supplier to resolve the issue. So is that software, and have you got a date for a possible upgrade?
It's not a software issue. It's mainly due to the bad debt provision. We've done a lot of work in business rates focusing on the higher and most aged debts that we have. So we're working through them as a service to see whether they can be recoverable, sending them to enforcement agents. And then when the end of that cycle reaches, that's when we need to have a discussion with finance over the debts that need to be written off and those that can be collected. Sorry, that was your second point. On your first point, the on arrangement, those are cases that have been referred but have arrangements agreed with the enforcement agents, so they have ongoing payments. We tend to, on our older debt, have a little bit more leniency on the level of payments that customers can make, because we take the view that at least some payment is better than no payment. So those are the cases that have got ongoing weekly and monthly payments coming into the service.
And finally, 8.5, you talk about 64,033 write-off value. Am I right in thinking you get 40% of this given to you by the government?
Yes, that's correct in respect of housing benefit overpayment.
Right. Okay, good. And last question, which isn't really to do with this, but it's to do with the future. It has been announced by the new Prime Minister to reduce business rates on some businesses. What have you had time to even begin to think about what effect that will have on you?
So the announcement made on the 23rd of July was to give the 20% reduction to pubs, clubs and live music. At the moment, until MHCLG provides us with the guidance around that scheme, we're having to make the assumption that that change won't result in a change to the overall national multipliers. What it will do is hopefully treat it similarly to the centrally funded relief, but until we receive the guidance, we won't know that for sure.
Councillor Knight wants to tag back in.
Thank you very much. This sort of first point is really driven by the previous comment I made regarding previous debts going back 15 years. So I'd just like to get a bit of an idea what circumstances typically drive an officer to report no prospect of recovery, and what would be considered an acceptable timeline. And I do understand that every case is different. And then on page 16, item 8, the housing benefit overpayments, and bear with me on this, so there is a correct question at the end. When you discuss housing benefits, and quite often in the news it's reported as fraud, so whose responsibility is it to check the applications before claims are actually paid out? With 512,000 overpaid, with a write-off of 64,000, which is or write-off, of 64,000, or 12.5%, is this considered an acceptable percentage? And I am aware through the notes that one case on loan was 31,000, so that actually reduces the debt to 32,000 at 6.5%. And the question behind that was, obviously we're facing the unitary type change. What would a performance review comparing Dover District Council, Canterbury and Thanet show as an average acceptable percentage for that collection? And then another question regarding Appendix 2, which you'll find on 21, page 21, it's just a simple question, but reduced collection figures lowest in the last 6 years. Why is that? Notes suggest more to collect in your notes underneath the table, but surely most of that is an increase in tax. I understand there are a few new houses in the area. And the final question under this is on Appendix 3. Just need clarification on the figures in that bottom write-off of business rates. 2024 you state underneath was 400,000, but the figure we're looking at 2025-26 is 827. Is that a genuine figure, a working figure, something might change, or are we looking at 100% increase in the write-off? Sorry, it was a lot of questions, but okay.
You'd
Sorry,
make Martin proud.
Just on the last point, could I ask where that information
On
came
page
from?
23, Appendix 3, at the bottom there, there's a statement that says business rates debt written off during 24-25 was 400,000, but above it in the write-off box, your total is 827,000. Unless I'm reading something wrong, that's double the figure.
The figure at the bottom of the sheet relates to 2024.
24-25, yeah.
2025.
But the one above it is 25-26.
And that was the part of the exercise that I mentioned earlier about reviewing the older debts on the business rates accounts and looking at which ones are recoverable and which ones aren't recoverable. And that forms part of that exercise. So there will be a general increase as we're going through those older debts in the write-offs because they're not recoverable.
Sorry, explaining.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
I've got forgive me, hopefully I've got all of your questions. So with reference to the no prospect of recovery, we don't generally have that in council tax and business rates. We follow the cycle all the way through and the debt don't generally tend to get written off. So where we've got unpaid outstanding balances for both council tax and business rates, they remain outstanding on the account, and where customers move or contact us, those debts haven't been written off. So then we would work through with the customer to tell them what and advise them what they owe. It works slightly differently for corporate income in the fact that there isn't so much discretion. There's more discretion, sorry, to recover the debt. So for housing benefit overpayments and corporate income, sometimes the customer, where we can prove that we are not going to get that debt collected, or whether it's not cost effective to go to court, a decision would be made that there isn't a prospect to recover that debt, as the debt is likely to be too costly to pursue. The housing benefit overpayments, if we do an attachment to benefit, for example, sometimes the payments that we get in can be as low as £3.50 a week. So there is an overall decision when the debts get high to look at that and value whether there is if payment stops, whether there is a point in pursuing it and cost effective to do so. For the housing benefit overpayment point of fraud related, most of those are where customers haven't provided us with their circumstances. So when they make their initial claim to us, that claim is verified and checked, and the income details are then verified and checked. And then there could be a change of circumstances within the year. For example, someone hasn't declared a private pension that we would not have had the ability to trace or look at. That's when the circumstances change, and that can result in the overpayment. And then others are related to actions taken by the DWP for their statutory benefit. I don't have the information with me at the moment to answer your question for the unitary percentages as we move forward, but I will come back to you on that by email and I'll provide you with the details in relation to that. I'll have the information for Dover, Thanet and Canterbury in respect of that, so I can answer that question separately. Yes, of course.
Yeah, so as I understand it, then the responsibility falls with you guys to get the right information and trust the information you're being given is correct, and there's no other checks outside of that.
We have information that is sent to us via the DWP, and anyone on Universal Credit, we have regular updates of those on a monthly basis, and that's how we would identify an income change or an additional pension.
Okay, looks like the questions have been exhausted and everything I was going to ask has been answered. So in that case, this one is also one for noting. So let's see your jazz hands. Yep. Horns, jazz hands, whichever one, either or, I like them all. Right, thank you very much. Okay, thank you for that, Sharon. We're going to move on now to item number 6, which is the annual write-off report for housing services, which you'll find pages 24 to 27 in your agenda packs. And this is going to be sung by Graham.
Sorry to disappoint, but it will not be sung. So my name is Graham. I'm the Senior Housing Officer for Income Recovery and Collection. So the key points from the report are my team's approach is to recover all former tenant arrears wherever possible, only writing off debt as a last resort. The largest proportion of write-offs, 25-26, relate to deceased tenants with no estate, followed by non-engagement in cases where tenants cannot be traced. Write-offs have increased slightly compared to last year, mainly due to reduced staffing capacity, limiting early intervention on the arrears. However, with recent restructure we've been through, I'm hopeful for next year we'll be able to collect a lot more moving forward. And importantly, we do not write off debt for current tenants, so we continue to pursue recovery action and take legal action where appropriate. If anyone has any questions, please feel free.
Councillor Knight.
I'm doing my best to fill some shoes. Seriously though, thank you for that, Graham. I would agree. I would have preferred a song, but it's just on item 4.1 could you just? I don't understand why we would worry about eviction and abandonment out of area. Means that doesn't make any sense to me. So could you just explain what that actually means?
Yeah, apologies. So eviction, abandonment out of area regards to they've been evicted or they've abandoned their property and now they've moved outside of the district or Kent. So we can no longer trace them via like council tax means or just another code we've got.
And then on page 28, that's the next one. So no other ones. Thank you.
Councillor Williams, you wanted in.
A couple of things. If I compare the write-off value this year compared to last year, it has gone up by a bit. Could you explain why? That's one question. Second question is, I'm a bit concerned about the staffing issue. Was there a freeze on recruitment then, or did it just take you a long time to find staff? And the third question is, you talk about one problem being not covered by insurance. That was in 4.3. Required repairs were not covered by insurance. Has whatever that is been sorted out, so should this happen again, the insurance will cover it?
Yeah, thank you. So staffing wise, it wasn't a recruitment freeze, it was just getting the right person for the job. As I'm sure you appreciate, chasing rent arrears or former tenant arrears is quite a tough job at the best of times. And you need that person who can have difficult conversations on a daily basis. So I believe now we've got the right people in place. The restructure, we've got enough members of staff that we need to now. That's happened within housing. So going forward, I'd like to believe that we will continue to collect as much as possible really going forward. Insurance wise, so this was a decant because of repair issues, and the only reason it would not be covered under the insurance would be due to if it's something we've neglected as DDC as a known issue. Apart from that, and it's not a common thing as well. I've been here 7 years, and this is the first one I think we've wrote off. So hopefully going forward there won't be any more. Can't promise.
So does that mean should this happen again, it will be covered by insurance? No, it's just one of those things.
Yeah, no, unfortunately,
Right.
if it was something that Dover Council were aware of and haven't acted on, then and that problem occurred, then I believe we wouldn't be eligible for insurance payments.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Sorry, just to jump in on that point. In that case, is there a process in place? I'm looking over this way in order to identify what these things could potentially be and prevent it from happening again. So I don't know whether that's something that's linked to complaints or.
Yeah, it would. So it goes to the loss adjuster, and then they evaluate the reasons for, and they'll get the evidence from repairs, etc., which isn't in my department, but they would liaise and be the findings of whatever's happened, and it will go from there. And it'd be down to the loss adjuster to find out if we're covered or not.
But from a procedural point of view, if it was something that's never happened before and it's taken everybody by surprise, is there a way of, I mean, obviously I'm not sure what the situation was, but if these things are going to happen, is there a way of catching these to get assurance that it wouldn't happen again, for instance?
I mean, I think we're probably talking about issues relating to disrepair here. I would guess. I don't know the details of these, but we've got very strong processes in place in respect of how we deal with disrepair, and the complaints process is really robust in respect of disrepair. So I would hope that when you put all those procedures together, actually we should be able to avoid these situations. But I think the narrow point is that where it is a disrepair situation where for whatever reason it hasn't been done, then it wouldn't be covered by the insurance, I think. But we are doing everything we can in terms of disrepair policies and procedures to ensure that they're done effectively in a timely way.
So there's a net that's going to catch it before it gets to that stage. I like it. Are there any more questions? No? Well, this one was also for note. So could we hang loose maybe this time? Brilliant. Love it. Fantastic. Thank you, Graham. Next time a song though. Yeah?
I can't promise. I'll probably be on annual leave.
Well, whoever's covering you will have to sing it or give an interpretive dance. Okay. We'll move on then to item number 7. This is Treasury Management Year End. Have I jumped ahead? No? Sorry, I thought there was noise like I just completely dropped an item, which is something I do. What? Right, well, you've jumped the gun a bit because now, Angie, we want to see a dance as you're delivering it. So this is pages 28 to 49 in your agenda pack. Angie, take it away.
There is no dancing, I'm afraid. This is interesting enough without dancing. Okay, and I know you've got questions lined up. I could see you biting at the bit. Okay, so this is the Treasury Management Report for 25-26, the year-end report. This goes with the draft accounts, which Helen is going to bring to you later on. So because it is draft accounts, it could possibly change as per the accounts changing, etc. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, we're going to jump in with Loughman and then Knight.
Thank you very much. Bear with me a while. In 1.3, we have that the council did not comply with the prudential indicator on 9.6 of Appendix 1A. I'm wondering whether that could have an explanation. Why didn't it comply? And am I wrong in thinking that that had something to do with exposure to interest rate risks? Either way, exposure to interest rate risks, I presume, is coming within standard. That's my key question. I do have a particular point, Chair, which I hope you'll give me some latitude to say. There's been some indication in discussions about how many housing units the council has established, given its manifesto commitments. And I was on page 50, looking at the committed capital contracts, which actually occupies the most significant amount of borrowing that we are looking at. And I'm looking at places, whether it's Richmond Park, Archers Court Road, Stanhope Road in Dover, Cross Road in Walmer, to Mungham Road in Deal, Military Road in Dover, Grove Road in Preston. We have a whole range of major projects of affordable housing that's coming on stream. And I just wanted to take the opportunity of actually mentioning this, because some things like this can get lost. And it's a significant matter to organise, manage and administer and include the financial arrangements. So I'd like to thank our officers for those financial arrangements, the borrowing that's had to be done, and looking forward to the results, which will benefit so many members of our community. But going back to that compliance.
So I'm, in terms of borrowing, I'm on first name terms with the broker. So, you know, he sorts us out. So for the prudential indicator, basically what it shows is that if the percentage for any borrowing had gone up by 1%, either up or down, it would have exposed us to a risk of further interest. And that prudential, the limit that we'd given ourselves, we then breached that limit ourselves. But of course, as we borrow more money and repay more interest, it is gonna go up. So we have increased that for 26-27. So you know, we won't breach that limit you know, during this financial year. However, you know, we didn't spot it quick enough. There was a risk, it obviously, because otherwise we wouldn't have not complied with the prudential indicators, but it wasn't a huge risk. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And some things, especially when the climate is volatile, can so easily be missed. And I think you probably answered my follow-up point, which was, given the situation that we find economically with international and global difficulties that are going to impact on our interest rates, you indicated that next year we're going to be fine, we're going to comply. And I assume, because I have every confidence that that kind of volatility range that we can expect, given the situations that we're currently experiencing internationally, have been taken into account.
Yeah, I mean, we have increased the limit on the prudential indicator for next year. I think ultimately, the more houses we build, the more borrowing we need, the more we are exposed to that risk, unless we start looking in long-term borrowing with the Public Works Loan Board, also known as PWLB. But we are monitoring that. We continuously monitor that with Arnie Close, our advisors. So the only way you remove that risk is to lock in. And if they think that we need to do some of that medium, long-term borrowing, then we'll do that accordingly. But we keep an eye on that throughout the year.
Thank you, Helen, because my point and the reason that I was reading out some of the developments was that if ever there was a risk worth taking, it's worth taking in relation to the benefits of our community, in relation to the affordable housing that we are determined to provide. So thank you.
I know that you guys are quite risk adverse, which is fine, I guess. So I have every faith that you've made sensible decisions that, you know, aren't blackjack ones. Councillor Knight, then Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the Treasury management was quite interesting reading. A couple of questions really based around what I've read, but the first one just to get an indication of what you guys feel, and I've just put a note here. I assume Canterbury and Thanet have similar investment portfolios. I'd imagine all councils do the same. Do we know what will happen to our investments when we're joined as one unitary? Will all the investments be pooled, or will they be kept as localised Dover investments? That's just a general. You probably don't know the answer, but I'm putting it out there. Yeah, yeah. And then on 1.3, Jeff's already pulled that question up because it really worried me. But then I turned over the page to page 30 and 7.1, and it says the council has operated with the prudential indicators in compliance. So it kind of two statements that contra each other. So I'm just wondering where we are on that. Are we operating in compliance or not? And then looking at the 5.4 return, can we assume these are all relatively low risk investments? Then on 39, I was a little bit confused by 5.17.
Tell you what, Councillor Knight, can we take these questions and then we'll do it like Martin would do it, like give 3 and then another 3. Okay.
So for the LGR question, I mean, Dover won't exist, so there won't be Dover specific investments. So they will become part of the new unitary authority. I don't think investments will be allocated to an area because it will be a whole authority and it will be pulled together as one. Yeah. 7.1, it does, again, it says except for, we complied except for 1A. In all areas except for the indicator and the exposure to interest rate risk. So it says the same as is in the intro. And then I didn't catch the third question, sorry. I don't know if Angela did.
I'm assuming that most of the investments we make are relatively low risk because of the 5.4 return. Safe bets, really.
Yeah, the investments that we made are all low risk. They're all ones that we are, we get a good rate of return, and they're slowly coming back up to their rate that they was. So yeah, they are. They're not high risk at all. And in terms of the investments, I assume they will be pooled, but they'll have to get them from me first. So don't worry.
Well, the reason I asked that was obviously because of the work that you guys have done to achieve the results that you have, and we don't know what the conditions and the status of the other councils are going to be in, so it would be nice for the rewards to stay locally, but we shall see. Anyway, may I go on with my... so moving on to page 39. I don't know whether I'm reading this wrong or whatever, but on 517, you've got an authority had set up a reserve of a load of kisses. I just wondered what that actually meant. And it's very sweet of you, I have to say. 7.3, this is quite close to home for me, obviously being based in Whitfield. And B&Q, Whitfield Court being the entire site next door, the council office up to Tesco's. And that's 4.5 million there. But where do we show this in our costings? The council offices themselves, the buildings that we actually here. I was just trying to find where that may be located, and I couldn't really identify it. And then just shall I break there? 2 more after that. Yeah.
So the properties that we own will be in the balance sheet under property, plant and equipment, but it's basically as one big lump sum, unfortunately. So you wouldn't be able to find it within there. So we draw those out for these because they're particularly big investments that we've got. But yeah, they are just recorded as one big lump sum. They're not, yeah. Oh, yes, sorry, this would be included within that as well.
But it's not an investment.
No, it's not an investment. No, sorry. No, it's not an investment. This building, we use it.
So, and coming back to 5.17, I think we should have taken that sentence out because as of yet we haven't set up a reserve. But that's something that we are looking into.
So they weren't kisses for the members?
They weren't kisses for the members.
Okay,
No, so-
Okay, and then just to finish off this item, which you probably touched on page 47, appendix 2, where you mentioned the volatility of the investments. I was just a bit surprised to show that the CCLA Better World Cautious Fund such a drop, a minus 2.74, which was 421,000, and then turning the page it changes to a plus 5.32. Is that just showing the volatility of the investment, or am I missing something there?
So on page 47, that would have been up to the end of the financial year.
Yep.
And then appendix 4 is up to the date that the report was done. That was from the 1st of April to the 31st of May. So it's kind of giving an update as to what was happening in between. So it has moved, yeah. Yes, CCLA Better World used to be the Churches Fund. Yeah, so it's kind of one of the safer ones, but unfortunately it doesn't provide us with a good rate of return.
Looks to be a bit of a misnomer then, doesn't it? Cautious fund. Anyway, sorry, did Councillor Williams want to come in?
Just a couple of questions. One fairly basic question. 1.2, additional short-term borrowing. How short is short? That's the first question. And the second question is, if you go back to that little table on page 39, 7.3, shared ownership housing is 4.5 million, but last year it was 6.6 million. I thought we were selling more shared ownership housing, so I don't quite understand why it's gone down.
Right, the page 39 of my copy doesn't have. Oh, sorry, no, it does have shared ownership. Yeah, sorry, we'd have to look into last year's figure. Okay, I mean, it might have been based on what we owned at that time. So if we just bought a bunch of shared ownership and hadn't yet sold the shares to the public, we would potentially show a higher value. Whereas now, if we only own half of those houses that we held at that time, because they've been done on shared ownership, the value would come down. So it would probably be towards around the timing of the purchases of the properties. So we buy the properties and then we go on to sell them to shared ownership. So it's probably around that timing. We can have a look, yeah.
And in terms of how short is short, it can be anything from a couple of weeks up to a year. That's what a year is, where that's the top of short-term borrowing for us. But yeah, it can be, if we only need it for 2 weeks, I'll only borrow for 2 weeks because I don't want to have excess funds. Obviously, I need a certain amount to have that buffer, but I don't want to have too much. So I'll only borrow for what I need. Yeah.
Okay, that looks like we've exhausted questions. That item was also for note. So can we get some gesture towards note? Okay, that's brilliant. Okay, so moving on to the next item is item number 8, Treasury Management Quarter 1 to 26-27. This is on pages 50 to 54 of your agenda pack. And now Angela's going to do a song for us.
Trust me, you don't want to hear me sing. Even my kids don't let me sing in the shower. That's, yeah. So this is for quarter 1 because the this governance committee was delayed, so we was able to fit in quarter 1. So it's the obviously just the same report, but updated with the new details.
I didn't actually have any questions on this, but I can see there are a couple. So we'll go Councillor Williams and then Councillor Knight.
Just a comment in passing. 1.2A and 1.2D, both very pleasing results. Just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Well, yeah, if you want to accept your praise.
Thank you very much. I found some under the bed.
Councillor Knight.
Yeah, just one question really, and that's on page 50E, which is a temporary investment of 5 million was made to a local authority, which will be repaid August 26. I'm sure you can't go into major details on that, but can we know what the local authority was and what the purpose of that loan is? And is this a typical arrangement between councils lending each other funds?
Yeah, so the council, I believe, is on Appendix 3. It does tell you who it is, I believe. I think it was Appendix 2, sorry. I think it was Surrey County Council. Yeah. And I wouldn't know what they wanted it for. It's probably for cash flow purposes, the same as us. But we get all of our short-term borrowing from other local authorities. We don't borrow from anywhere else. So the broker that I mentioned earlier would arrange that the borrowing between all of the local authorities. So instead of me phoning him to borrow money, he phoned me and said, "Have you got any spare?" And at that point I did, and I could get more for it if I loaned it out rather than putting it in the money market funds. So that's what we did after looking to make sure that we thought that they would return the money, which
Yeah, so you go through a due diligence process to check that through. Yeah, it's interesting to hear though, because I wasn't actually aware that that operated that way. I thought we went into some sort of money market type situation. Wasn't aware that we could lend to each other. That's really, really interesting. Thank you.
Do we have any more for this? Councillor Loughman?
Can we note that report with thanks?
Okay, we can give this one a thumbs up, guys. Yeah, love it. There you go. We like that one. Right. We're going to move on now to item number 9, financial outturn for 25-26. And this one is pages 55 to 65 in your agenda pack. This one's also for noting, and it's going to be performed with interpretive dance by Helen.
My interpretation of this report is quite a sedated dance. I mean, obviously, this is one of the highlights of the evening with only item 10 to come. So this is the annual outturn report for 25-26. And this accompanies the statement of accounts. This is hopefully the, shall we call it, user-friendly, readable version of what happened in the year. As the statement of account obviously has a far more technical detail. The key points to note are within section 2, mainly noting that the general fund had a year-end position of £400,000 surplus, which was transferred to the smoothing reserve. The HRA had a surplus of 2.8 million for the year. Yeah, so I was just checking my numbers. 2.8 million for the year, which has enabled us to top up the housing initiatives reserve, which we use to support major works in the HRA and housing developments. We spent approximately £43 million on major projects in 25-26, and around about 90 million then were funded externally. So it's really good funding that we were brought into the district. Happy to take any questions. Bear in mind, I have been to Cabinet and Scrutiny already, so not too many.
But now you're at governance. Well, I was just going to say, I think the very fact that we're in surplus at this position is really good. And also the very fact we're spending all of that money on these major projects, which driving past Tides and seeing the frame up now and seeing how close we are at the beacon is really exciting times. So there are a lot of hands. So we're going to go Councillor Beer first, then Councillor Williams, then Councillor Loughman, and probably Councillor Knight, I imagine. So we'll do that order.
Thank you. It was good to hear from our colleague in Partnership One earlier on. Don't know if it's good or bad that she's not in the room now, because my question is about the effectiveness of Partnership One. It's been in place now for some time, since we changed the arrangements when the previous arrangement ceased, because the provider that we had earlier didn't want to continue, and we set up Partnership One, which is a shared local authority owned arm's length. What's the right terminology for it? Yeah, right. I note in these that we have higher than expected additional services mentioned in both the original budget surplus table and the forecast surplus. Is that just because we were guessing when we first set out? Is it because Partnership One has proved to be more expensive than we thought? Also, obviously, we had a significant expense in the migrating Partnership One Revs and Bends system to the cloud as well, which I'm guessing is a one-off cost. So could you give us a comment, please, on the general feeling of, was it the best move possible? Did we do a good job? And is there more to do? Are there improvements still to be made?
Okay, so I think what's probably quite important to note is that when Partnership One was set up, they took on approximately 1.3 million of costs that were being borne and shared by the councils, including sort of IT security, some of the staffing and software maintenance that had previously been paid by the councils rather than by Civica Direct. So I think when we set the budget, we set it at our best estimate. And as you know, throughout the year we've monitored it, and there have been some extra work, so they escape me now, some extra pieces of work. Any changes like we talked about earlier with the business rates, changes from government that potentially will need additional resource sometimes, and those kind of things happening. You're correct, the software cost was a one-off, but that was a need, as Civica, could Civica still supply the res and benefit system, and that very much was needed to be done to the cloud, and that ties in with our sort of security requirements and all those things that we wanted from those systems anyways. But that's a one-off, and that will last us moving forward. There was something else, was there? Sorry, was another part of the question? Didn't write it all down.
So general, do the directors all feel that it was the very best move? Or is the partnership working with our other co-owners working very well? Have there been any unexpected issues at that higher strategic level, or are we actually in real good shape there?
I mean, I think we have an excellent working relationship with the partnership. They are an excellent, very knowledgeable team. And we are very lucky with the staffing we have in place, and Mark Emery lead Partnership One. I think they're well managed, and they're very much the same people that brought us through COVID and all the complexities we had then. And it works very much as a department of the council. I'll work very well with the other two 151s from Canterbury and Thanet. With Mark, I was before Mark Davis's departure, I was the board member, and the board works very effectively, and now it's Peter Francis, and that works very well. And I think actually it is a very good and successful supportive partnership. And I think with LGR, they're a good chunk of the way there. It really helps. It's a big complex area of ours that's sort of dealt with.
Chair, if I may, just to add, in terms of the sort of resilience aspect as well, if something happens that, from a customer services perspective, if something happens at Dover, then they can direct resources to help Dover deal with it, or whatever we need, and they've got that ability to be resilient, whereas if we'd sort of taken it back in house, for example, that resilience doesn't exist. So personally, I think it's a really successful arrangement that we've got in place.
Councillor Williams.
Again, I wanted to comment to see, very pleasing to see a budget surplus of 400k this year, particularly as last year we had the deficit I looked up of 776 versus a big improvement, which is great. 7.1, a small query. You moved the HRA, so this is 7.1. You moved money into the housing initiative reserves, leaving a deficit. Why did you transfer so much? Why didn't you have it so that the HRA deficit was zero? Okay, that's the second question, and I'll leave that for now. I'll come back to that another time.
So for the HRA, I mean, for me, 10,000 deficit is balanced. It's in the rounding. Our policy is that we keep £1 million in the HRA balance. So by taking 10,000 out of the having a £10,000 surplus, we're still deficit. We are still able to keep that £1 million balance. So putting it into the reserve just makes good sense. It's putting the money into your savings account if you've got enough in your current account. So I think for me. And in terms of the general fund, there's a lot has changed over the last year. The position for this year, getting the surplus, has been positive. We had some extra income streams, so you'll see from the things. The planning income this year was I think it was about £600,000 up on the budget. So it doesn't take that many of them to turn a deficit into a surplus position. Well, this year we were forecasting, if I remember rightly, £6,000 surplus for the general fund. We're just working on Q1 position now, so that'll be coming to Cabinet in September.
Councillor Knight. Did I leave out Loughman? I did. All right, Councillor Loughman, then Councillor Knight.
Helen, this is a report writing question, so it should be an easy one. And the context is, a number of years ago, I had to do a study of Treasury and Bank of England economic projections. And what was very consistent was that they were invariably wrong. And what I don't want to see are unnecessary criticisms, because in my humble reading of so many of these pages, time after time in governance, exciting though they may be, it reflects to me that you and your team have been doing a really standout job in the last period of time. So it's in that context I'm asking you the question. You say that you, in the report, it says that we estimated there was a £6,000 budget surplus, but we've actually got 340k surplus instead, or whatever. And that, if I wanted to read it in such a way, means, hey, you got it really wrong here. And I'm just wondering why you needed to say 6,000 in a report, because what I'm interested in governance relates to processes that come which might result in a deficit, or the eventual surplus, some of the contributions that came to a surplus. So what it feels like an unnecessary shooting in the foot. I just wondered how you reacted to my comment.
So first, thank you very much for the initial comment, thanking the team, and it is very much a team effort, and actually we've worked really hard to build the team and strengthen the team, and we've got some excellent staff within the team now. In terms of the £6,000 surplus, so we always try and tell the story from when we set the budget to what we monitored through the year, what we told you in each quarter, to what happened at the end of the year. So the £6,000 surplus is the number that you would have seen when you approved the budget at council back in March 25. Seems like a long time ago now. And then that takes us to the current position. So it's always just trying to be talked in the training as well about the cycle, and it's just trying to tie in those cycles so members can see. And bearing in mind this report has gone to cabinet and scrutiny and here, so it's serving a number of purposes. It's briefing cabinet on what they said they do in terms of the budget and what happened in terms of the budget, and for you can see the process that we've got to for here. So it's trying to keep the cycle of the financial reports.
Thank you, Helen. I understand that, and I can sympathise a great deal. I am a Labour Party member where the winter fuel allowance was rejected at one point and accepted at another, and we need to have all of those things at umbrella.
Councillor Knight.
Yes, Councillor Loughman, thanks ever so much for stealing most of my things. But generally, I've made a note here, and it's a little statement, and then a couple of questions. And first of all, I want to send my congratulations to the team here on an end of surplus of 400,000 in the general fund. I think that's sensational, and we can only be grateful that we've got a great team. I know this is less than the forecast. But given the variables and the impact on the world crisis, that we can understand why that is. And certainly when Mr. Trump and the Argentina lot in the World Cup football do what they've done, it must have an impact on us as well. But I can only imagine other councils around the country can only dream of ending up with a surplus like we have. So once again, well done. There's a positive variance of 394, which is great news. And then again, in the HRA, I read a very positive, very healthy variance of 2.8 million reserve. I am particularly pleased, and Jeff did mention it, to see 20.1 million investment in affordable housing in areas where I believe the developers are letting us down. So really, really positive, and thanks for that. So I'll come on to page 59. And kind of just a question, really, because it intrigues me. In the box on 7.1, under the original budget surplus, you've got a reduction in dwelling capital expenditure of 2 million. That seems massive. So I'd just like to understand how you can actually achieve that size. And then something that we've discussed before, and it comes up with, and I'm going to say Mr. Grant and Mr. Thornton because I thought that was hilarious. But when we meet with Grant and Thornton, the revaluation of the properties was standing at 40%. Are we still on track to achieve those revaluations within the 3 years that we discussed? So that's my two questions. Thank you.
Okay. So if I take those individually, hopefully, the first point, and the congratulations on the surplus. It's obviously the team have done the counting, the monitoring, very much the nagging. I encourage nagging of their budget managers, but ultimately it's a council-wide thing that people are managing their budgets effectively and tightly, and we are maximising income where we can. And I think it's important to recognise that, although we do the counting and keep an eye and monitor everything, overall it's reflected by sort of the culture and the support and the behaviour across the whole authority. So for the housing revenue account, the £2 million reduction in dwelling capital expenditure. So some of that is offset by the 810,000 you see below, which is the increase in responsive repairs. So there's a limited capacity in the property services team. So if we have a higher demand on responsive repairs, then there'll be less capacity to progress the capital repairs. So those often balance out to a certain extent. And then there's a lot of work being done, bringing contracts forward, and looking at, we've done the big stock condition survey that you're aware of. That's really fine tuning that we're spending the right money in the right place. So rather than spend the money in 25, 26 in a hurry, for want of a better term, you know, we've been waiting the stock condition survey to make sure that we get the right money spent in the right place. By putting that money into the housing initiatives reserves, it's available for spending in the future. We've got Decent Homes 2 coming up, so making sure we are planning properly, so better to spend slowly and correctly than spend just because the budget's there. And then the final point was Grant Thornton. What was the final?
Revaluation.
Oh, revaluations. Yeah. So for the 25-26, we did the portion that we agreed that we would do, and the team are aware of what's needed to be done with the external valuer, which is Wilkeshead Eve, for the 26-27. So we are still working to those target dates. We're on track.
Councillor Williams?
You say here that you've done 40% of the properties during this year. Last year, did you also do 40%?
It was 20 last year.
So next year you'll do another 40. Yeah. Right. Okay. That's what I wanted to know. And the other small question on page 66, preparation of a close down plan. What's a close down plan?
It's effectively the timetable of all the steps we need to take across the team and working with budget managers. So it's almost a day-by-day plan of what different members of the team have to do, who's responsible for what, making sure that we cover everything that needs to be done.
Right, looks like all those questions are exhausted too. That item was for noting. Can I see? It's good. All right, that is noted. Now, guys, finally, we're on to item number 10, which, control your excitement, but it's the draft statement of accounts for 25-26. This is pages 67 to 172 in your agenda. It's a big boy. It's going to be done by Helen, and just if you can contain the excitement, we'll take questions after Helen speaks and dances now. Okay.
So obviously this is the item you've been looking forward to, and you've all, I'm sure, thoroughly appreciated the early printed copy that you got to have a nice early read of before the publication of the agenda, and I hope you've all enjoyed spending that extra quality time with the statement of accounts this year. So this is the unaudited set of accounts. So the audit will be taking place in full from September-ish time onwards, with a view to bringing it back to Governance Committee for formal sign-off at the November meeting. It presents the technical side of the accounts. So as you'll see, the narrative report very much reflects the outturn report and tells the story. And then all the rest is the requirements under the accounting regulations, the accounting requirements, and the statutory document that we have to produce. If I can take you through it page by page, then I'm sure you would love that. Or we could just take any questions if you have any.
I'll see what you guys have asked, and then I might ask if you don't ask them, but I might not need to. So we'll go Councillor Loughman and then Councillor Knight.
Helen, while I smiled appropriately when you mentioned about the early printing, for old stagers like me, the medium-term financial projection and this statement of accounts, having them in print earlier is an absolute boon. But of course, it does mean that I have more time to read it, and so I'm going to proceed in a true Councillor Bates way. I'm going to present 3 points, and I reserve the right to come back when Councillor Knight, if Councillor Knight doesn't get my other points afterwards. My points are, first, the table on page 9 of the report looked at a shortfall in delivery savings targets of 520,000.
Councillor Loughman, which page are we looking at?
So that's page 9 of the report, page 79 of our papers. The shortfall in delivery savings targets, and I'm wondering what the reason for that might be. And then The second one is page 43, if I remember rightly, which is of the report, which is page 113 of our papers. And that relates to income expenditure in relation to investment properties and changes in their fair value of just somewhat over 3 million. And I'm wondering about that significant change, for example, from the previous year and the amount that we have there. And the third and my last one, but I do have some in reserve if Councillor Knight doesn't use is on page 50 of the report, which is page 120. Page 54 of the report relating to short-term borrowing, which is something I always bat on about, Helen. It would be wrong for me not to raise it once more. It's at a, I got this right, at a plus 19.5 from previous year up in the short-term borrowing. And I'm wondering whether that relates to those housing developments or what it relates to. And I'll sort of retire at that point.
Okay, so I mean, technically, we should have had the savings question under the outturn report. So I'm not sure. So really, we reported during the year. So when we set the budget at the beginning of the year, there was I think it's 860,000, if I remember rightly, of savings targets proposed during the year for various reasons. They weren't all achieved. And they've been reported quarterly, but there were some things like one of the examples was looking at street cleansing. Did we reduce the number of high-speed road cleanses during the year was one of the proposals, and it was decided that actually we thought that was an important thing to continue with. Corporate maintenance of our assets was one of the things that they looked at trying to deliver savings on, but in order to keep our buildings wind and watertight, you need to spend a certain amount, and it all depends what comes up each year. So there was a number of targets set during the year that weren't then delivered. I think CCTV was another one when we looked at did we reduce the hours, and then we had a flood, we had a fire, there was something else. There was something else. We've had some protests, and again considered not appropriate to make those changes at this time. So, yeah. And if you more detail on that, you can look back at the quarterly reports that were presented for budget monitoring. Investment property changes in fair value. Can you? I mean, ultimately, hang on. Let me find the page. It's page 43. The 19.5 million, yes, that's the housing development. So the more we build, the more we borrow. It's directly related. And the other one was was it 80 something? You recall what page it was? It was 43 of the main document, but it's 7 to scroll through.
113.
The income expenditure in relation to investment property changes in fair value. So these will be the accounting valuations of the investment properties. So where we have gone with Wilkeshead Eve, and they are reviewing. So these are some of those assets that will have been reviewed and revalued. So they will then have been reduced in value. That goes through our income and expenditure account. And then because we're a council, we reverse it out in terms of, so it has no impact on the general fund budget. So it's a technical accounting adjustment.
Thank you very much. I think the point that we need to bear in mind, representing our residents, is when we see savings, on one level, it's very good. It provides benefit financially, and we need that given how councils under both parties have suffered in terms of cuts. But savings can also impact on service effectiveness, and that's something else that we have to sort of bear in mind. But I thank you for your answers. Thank you.
Councillor Knight, I'm just instigating a new rule. actually to add to calling out numbers of pages, but I reckon all questions, if you're having multiple, need to come in threes. Three's a nice number. So we'll do 3 and then another 3. Yeah, sounds fair, right? Yeah,
well, don't worry.
call it the Bates rule.
Don't worry,
Councillor Knight.
I haven't got too much to say. I wanted to start by thanking Helen and the team there, because the accounts, we've looked at many accounts, and I've looked at hundreds of accounts over the years, and it's a pleasure, and it's quite structured, and we can find our way through it. So thank you for the work there, and I think you're doing a wonderful job, and I hope moving forward under the unitary that it continues in a positive and professional way that it has been conducted. So thank you all very much. I'm not going to go into too much because Jeff's already covered part of what I was going to talk about fair value, but there's just a couple of ones that I wanted to pull up and just get an answer really. On 121, page 121 or 51 of the original document, under the fair value hierarchy of investment properties, can you just explain why Whitfield Court Business Park would drop £1 million, whereas everything either else is stable or gone up? I just don't understand why that figure would drop so significantly. And the other question, coming close to home for me, and on page 120, under the committed capital contracts, you've got Richmond Park, Archers Court Road, Whitfield, and you've got £1 million sitting there in the commitment. For the life of me, I can't work out what that commitment's for. So it'd be really useful to know that. I don't want to dig into all of them, but that is it's my ward, and it'd be really useful to know what's going on, what the plans are. So I'll leave it there for a moment. Thank you.
So in terms of the Whitfield Court valuation, I mean, ultimately we are previously they were valued in-house by our in-house value. We've now gone to Wilkes Head Eve as an external valuer. They will be taking potentially a different valuation approach. They've everything has been reviewed and revalued. So I think it's just because it's a new organisation looking at it. It's not like anything material has changed over there. But it's following the RICS guidance and the requirements under the accounting code for that. So it will just be a different approach by the valuer. We wouldn't necessarily have that detail. It's a bit of a dark art. Yeah. It's just one of them. Yeah. And then Angela will take the other one.
Going back to Whitfield Court, our internal valuer now, she would have reviewed all of these, and if she felt that any of them were different or were too far out, she would have challenged them. So she must have looked at it as well and thought that it looked okay. So in terms of Richmond Park, so the developer came to us and has offered us some housing there. It is kind of odd houses, a pair here, a pair there. On the estate, it's kind of a small development, which is why it's only worth £1 million. It's a few properties on there. Nothing. Yeah. No, it is actually properties that we're buying.
Crack on, Jeff.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Knight. I've only got actually one more. It just feels meaty, Helen. Page 94 of the report, or page 164 of our papers, under expenditure, revaluation loss. Are we talking technical accounting here? Because it's really quite an extreme variant, isn't it?
Yeah, we are talking technical accounting. It's not unusual to see these big numbers on the HOA. When you consider we've got 5,000 properties. Actually, per properties, I can't do the maths now, but it's not very much money. If you divide the 24.5 million by 5,000, it's I want to say it's about 5,000 property, but I might have my zeros wrong, but it's not significant. And again, we've done a full, what's called a beacon valuation of the whole housing stock, a big chunk of those assets to get valued, to get assurance from Grant Thornton on. So, a massive piece of work. They haven't been valued at this level of detail for 5 years, a good 5 years. So we've been assuming inflationary increases or market inflation increases over the past 5-year period, and now it's been a full detailed review. So it's reflecting that, catching up really.
It's part of that ongoing work that Councillor Knight mentioned earlier. So I'm assuming that, given you're assuming 40% next year, we could have a similar technical adjustment. And if that's the case, and either way, this technical adjustment is very interesting when one looks at potential reforms of council tax, etc., given how revaluation hasn't occurred for about 30 years.
In terms of whether it will happen, this line in particular shouldn't happen to that extent next year, because this is the housing stock. We've revalued the whole housing stock this year, and in terms of the valuations that we've done, the ones that we've done so far, we've done the biggest. We've done the B&Qs, we've done this building, so I would expect it to ease off a bit unless we find something radical. But the biggest, most expensive assets have been done as the early wave, and now we'll be moving on to car parks, toilets, those kind of things. So I wouldn't expect those same movements again next year, but I won't guarantee there won't be. And if there's a big move in the housing market, it doesn't take much to move the housing dwelling number quite significantly.
Councillor Williams.
Looking at this table again, revaluation loss 24 million. That's huge.
But it's a technical loss, isn't it? It's not a real loss.
Yeah, it's the technical loss from the revaluation that we've just talked about. And again, over 5,000 properties, it's not significant per property.
This is part of the 40% that you looked at, yes? So were they mainly houses?
Yeah, so this is for the housing revenue account. So this is the entire housing stock. It's the revaluation of the entire housing stock.
Yeah, it's like play money, isn't it? It's not real money, and you're not going to go sell the houses either. So it's like it's one of them. Are there any more questions, Councillor Beer?
Again, mine's a broader question. Are we content that we will satisfy our external auditors in terms of timetables? Will we be in a good place this year, or will it be next year when we're in a good place to please our external auditors? I'll say no more.
There's the 60.
So as I believe Sophia's watching,
Hi, Sophia.
yeah, everybody give her a wave. So we are working very closely with them already. A lot of information from our side has been provided to them early. So as soon as we completed, Cherry, who's come previously, Felicity and the team have been providing information so that they can then review all our data and select all their samples. What we're working with them to do is that they review the data, they select the samples they want, and over the summer we can prepare those samples so when they come in September, they are ready to go with the audit. So we're doing as much of that up front as we can. Obviously they've got to manage within their own audit timetables. They've got Kent to sort out and various other councils. But at the moment things are going fairly smoothly. A lot of work is being done. We're doing as much up front as we can, and we just need to manage that process alongside the budget process in September. But again, we have a strong team. We've had some stability in the team, and there's a lot of knowledge there. Most people now have been through the audit last year, so they know what to expect. We know what we need to do. So I would hope we are as best placed as we can be.
So just to follow up on that, provided then Grant Thornton have all the personnel in place at the right time, we should be on timetable. Thank you.
Have we exhausted all questions? Right. Well, that one was also for notes. So can you get some more jazz hands? Right. There we go. That's noted and ready to go for the audit. Right. Well, in that case, we've come to the end of this agenda, which I know is exciting. And I thank you all for your time and reading all of the papers, which was a mammoth effort. And you did great. Honestly, I'm so proud. Chair, I'm the chair, aren't you or not? Councillor Beer.
Possibly next year we might need to build in one extra meeting instead of having, inserted. Perhaps we should make provision for this time of year when there's likely to be a great deal to deal with, possibly dropping in the annual calendar, and possibly then it could be withdrawn if it's not needed, just for next year's calendar suggestion.
Well, with this one, if we'd have kept all of those items in, it would have been such a mammoth task to be able to sit and do that. Obviously, if it comes up again that we're going to have a huge agenda, it could be something that could be looked at. But I'm feeling like this might have been an outlier, an anomaly. So, yeah. But that, yeah. Yeah, if it's starting to look like it's going to be too meaty right early doors, then we can sort that out. But thank you, everybody. That was great. See you later.